Back again.
Check it, because I was playing with it.
It's recording.
Is it?
Yeah. So another episode of A Muslim and an Atheist Breaks Bread. What you saying, Babs?
I'm good, man.
Okay, so hopefully this video is in English or with some subs. Do you know what? The last video I wanted to do that was one of the things as well, innit? But every time I look for these videos, I do try and find someone of the people to look to for the source of information. Not that always means that it's more reliable, but I don't know, I just feel more comfortable doing that. But sometimes you can't, innit? So we were short on time, so I'm not going to that. I found this video, it's in English, we'll be able to understand it. This won't be the only video we're going to do. As I like to say, you can't learn anything from a 10-20 minute video, but it can give you a little bit more understanding. So, yeah, we're going to do Aryan origins, migration theory, and etymological history. So again, this is we're talking about the theory of North India and South India, basically, and where the people of North India come from versus the people of South. Now, there's a lot of theories saying that Aryans, essentially Europeans, whether they were Romani or Eastern Europeans, were in North India. Now, a lot of Indians dispute that, a lot agree with it, from what I'm learning from my comments. So I just thought we'd dive into it because I find it very, very interesting. Should we jump straight in? Let's go.
Brought to you by the World History Encyclopedia and the study of antiquity and the Middle Ages. Aryan, a definition. Written by Joshua J. Mark. Narrated by D.W. Draffin. Aryan is a designation originally meaning civilized, noble, or free, without reference to any ethnicity. It was first applied as a self-identifying term by a migratory group of people from Central Asia, later known as indo-iranians, who settled on the Iranian plateau, and later applied to indo-aryans, who traveled south to settle northern India. The word had no widespread ethnic connotation prior to the 19th century CE, other than its usage by the Persians, known as Iranians, from Aryans, to distinguish themselves from their Muslim Arab conquerors in the 7th century CE, and even then, it could be argued, it was not so much an ethnic distinction as one of class and personhood. Prior to the conquest, Persia had been the land of the Aryans, and afterwards a term was coined for non-Aryans. Aryan became associated with ethnicity and especially with light-skinned Caucasian superiority only after Western European scholars began translating, and often misinterpreting, Sanskrit texts in the 18th and more extensively in the 19th centuries CE. Theories had been advanced earlier regarding a correlation between Sanskrit and European languages, but this concept was popularized by the Anglo-Welsh philologist Sir William Jones, lived 1746 to 1794 CE. In 1786 CE, who claimed there was a common source for these languages, which he called Proto-Indo-European. Jones's claim inspired later writers to identify this common source, and encouraged the French elitist Joseph Arthur de Gobineau, lived 1816 to 1882 CE, to develop the racist theories concerning Aryan blood and white supremacy, which would become popularized in Germany through the works of Houston Stewart Chamberlain, lived 1855 to 1927 CE, the British-born political philosopher who would become Adolf Hitler's mentor and inspiration, as well as informing the ideology and work of Alfred Rosenberg, lived 1893 to 1946 CE, which empowered the Nazi Party in Germany, circa 1930 to 1945 CE. Jones's claim would also influence the work of the German philologist Max Muller, lived 1823 to 1900 CE, who, in attempting to identify this common source via the Rig Veda and the history of the Indus Valley civilization, created the myth of an Aryan invasion of the region, which claimed light-skinned Aryans conquered darker-skinned indigenous people and established high civilization, an interpretation of his work which Muller himself never intended and, in fact, repudiated. The work of Gobineau, Chamberlain, and the Aryan invasion claim would be embraced by the British throughout the 19th and 20th centuries CE to justify their control of India as they were the Aryans, a superior race, who were bringing culture and civilization to the less fortunate. This view was encouraged and popularized by the work of the British archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler, lived 1890 to 1976 CE, who excavated the ancient Indus Valley.
All these dates are making me dizzy. But you can see how easy England would fit onto their canvas in it in terms of that same ideology. If Hindu, Asian people, Indian people already had that, mindset of whiter the brighter.
But I don't think it just said that. I think it said originally it didn't start out to be colour.
It wasn't, but it did become colour. And he said by the time the Europeans got through with it, it was all about. So when the English came to rule.
Yeah, but that was through writings of people.
Yeah, influence.
Yeah, that was through influence.
Yeah, but so the influence, like I said, was easy. Among the Europeans, they said, we are the Aryans.
Yes.
So we're just going to rule you because your whole culture is set up for us to be in charge.
Are noble, and so
yeah.
That's what it is basically.
So this is what I say. It just made it easy for them to snap in and fit and run the thing because it was already set up for them to do it. Anyway, go on again.
Ancient Indus Valley civilization cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, and claimed his finds supported Muller's Aryan invasion theory. Just as the fair-skinned Aryans of old had brought civilization to India, Wheeler claimed, so now had the British. Most of Wheeler's work has been discredited in the modern day, as has Muller's invasion theory, and the works of every contributor to a definition of Aryan, as referencing Caucasian, have equally been dismissed as either misguided, misinterpretations, or intentionally racist. In the present day, the term is understood to properly refer to the early Indo-Iranian and Indo-Aryan migratory group, possibly originally from the region of the Ural River, or, according to some scholars, to the Indo-Iranians only based on the continued usage of the term by the great Persian empires of the Near East. Early migration and origin of term. It is thought that the migratory band of peoples, later referred to as Indo-Iranians and Indo-Aryans, came originally from the area of modern-day Kazakhstan, near the Ural River, and moved slowly toward the Iranian plateau, where they arrived sometime prior to the 3rd millennium BCE. Whatever they may have called themselves at this time is unknown, but they would later self-reference as Aryans, designating a class of people who were free, noble, and civilized as contrasted with those who did not share their values. There is no evidence of a racial difference, only a class difference. The term seems to have been used in the same way one today might differentiate between high or low-class individuals. Scholar Kaveh Farokh comments, "The word Aryan means noble, lord, or freeman in old Iranian languages and has very little to do with Eurocentric doctrines of Nordic racial supremacy, these being first formulated by 19th century racialist philosophers such as Chamberlain." The archaeologist J.P. Mallory states that As an ethnic designation, the word Aryan is most properly limited to the indo-Iranians, and most justly to the latter, where it still gives its name to the country Iran. The great Persian king Darius describes himself as Aryan. The name Iran, literally land of Aryans, is derived from Aryanam, the plural form in Avestan. Avestan is the early Iranian language in which the Zoroastrian scriptures, the Avesta, are written, the earliest source for the origin and meaning of the term Aryan. That which is worth hearing and remembering in the Avesta is referred to as Arya, one who hears, remembers, and acts on these worthy precepts is an Aryan. Zoroastrianism developed in part from the early Iranian religion and retained various aspects of it, so, most likely, the term was used the same way prior to the time of Zoroaster, 1500 to 1000 BCE, to mean one who adhered to the path of light rather than darkness. The same meaning of the term was understood in India, where it appears in the texts of Hinduism, Buddhism, and elsewhere. Scholar Jeffrey D. Long provides the standard Hindu definition of Aryan as noble, cultured, gentleman, a term by which ancient Vedic peoples referred to themselves and their cultural and religious practices, in contrast with Mleka, or barbarian. It does not appear that the term Arya had any ethnic or racial connotations until 19th century European scholarship thus interpreted it, on the false assumption of a correlation between culture and ethnicity. The term refers not to ethnic characteristics, but to cultural and spiritual ones. Further commenting on the ancient meaning of the term, scholar John Key cites the Indian historian Romila Thapar's informed opinion that it is doubtful whether the term Arya was ever used in an ethnic sense. Scholars Robert E. Buswell, Jr. and Donald S. Lopez, Jr. note that in Buddhism, Arya retains the Persian meaning of noble or superior, and scholar John M. Collar agrees, writing of the Buddha's concept of the Four Noble Truths. This fourfold truth is called noble, Arya, meaning that it is worthy of assent and respect because it is supremely valuable. It is no surprise that this term should mean the same thing in two different cultures, because both share many common cultural aspects. Migration and the Indus Valley Civilization. At some point, the so-called Indo-Aryans of the original migratory group went south toward India, where they are thought to have merged with the indigenous people of the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization or Harappan culture, circa 7000 to circa 600 BCE. This civilization was highly advanced, as evidenced by Neolithic sites such as Mehrgarh, occupied prior to 7000 BCE, whose populace developed agricultural techniques, religious rituals, domestication of plants and animals, and produced impressive artistic works. By circa 2600 BCE, the great cities of Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Ganeriwala, and over 1,000 others had risen, the ruins of which give evidence of advanced urban planning and technological skill. These cities had running water and a highly developed sewer and drainage system which directed rainwater or waste toward fixtures on either side of the streets. Homes were constructed in such a way as to cut down on outside noises and were built with wind catchers, which provided air conditioning within, a luxury not even Rome, at its height, developed. The people of the Indus Valley also created a writing system, as yet undeciphered, musical instruments, farming implements, and large, flat-bottomed boats. Ports were constructed with great warehouses for good, and trade was conducted with a number of other nationalities, notably the people of Mesopotamia and Egypt. At some point, between circa 1900 to circa 1500 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization began to decline. Cities were abandoned, and there was a significant migration of the people toward the south of the subcontinent. This period of migration and change coincides with the development of Vedic thought and the so-called Vedic period, circa 1500 to circa 500 BCE, when the Vedas, the sacred texts of Hinduism, were committed to written form in Sanskrit. Since the people of the Indus Valley civilization did not write in Sanskrit, this language, and the concepts it expressed in the scriptures, had to have come from somewhere else. It is thought that they arrived with an indo-aryan migration, perhaps many and over a number of years, and the cultures of the two people then blended. Kohler writes, "The Vedic age began when the Sanskrit-speaking peoples began to dominate life and thought in the Indus Valley, probably between 2000 and 1500 BCE. Historians used to think that these Sanskrit-speaking peoples who called themselves Aryans came to the Indus Valley in northwest India as conquerors some 3,500 years ago. But recent scholarship has challenged this thesis of conquering Aryans. What we do know is that the earlier Indus culture, which flourished from 2500 to 1500 BCE, and which, judged by its archaeological remains, was quite sophisticated, declined at this time. We also know that the Vedic thought and culture, reflected in the Rig Veda, has a continuous history of dominance in India during the last 3,500 years. It is likely that the cultural traditions of the Vedic peoples mingled with the traditions and customs of the Indus people. A counterview to the above is the so-called out-of-India theory, usually given as OIT, which claims that Vedic thought and Sanskrit, developed in the Indus Valley, was exported to Central Asia and then returned with a migratory wave. This theory has been rejected by mainstream scholarship and is advanced almost always by those with a nationalist agenda. It is understandable, however, how one would support such a view when, for well over 100 years, Western scholarship has regularly attributed one's cultural achievements to others. The migration of the Indus Valley inhabitants to the south is well established, but there is no need to assume that some invading force drove the relocation. It was most likely due not to any new arrivals, but to climate change, drought, and decline in trade with Mesopotamia and Egypt, both distracted by domestic affairs. The Indus Valley's civilization's decline corresponds to the Middle Bronze Age in Mesopotamia, 2119 to 1700 BCE, during which the Sumerians were busy driving out the Gutians, Hammurabi of Babylon was conquering cities, and the Hittites were invading. In Egypt, the Middle Kingdom, 2040 to 1782 BCE, had begun to decline after the reign of Sobek-Neferu, circa 1807 to 1802 BCE, and this was hastened by the weak 13th dynasty, which lacked the bureaucratic skills and administrative strength.
Wow. What do you think so far? Good video, to be perfectly honest. Explains a lot. Yeah, I think the notion of Aryans that I've always known is again, invasion. But it also comes from a lack of teaching, right? This does. Because I always remember in school there just being a link from Hitler to Aryans. No, seriously. And then it's all that, the swastika, and that's where it comes. It comes from that Aryan principle. So they've always made that link, but never actually really explained in depth what the link is. So yeah, I mean, we'll watch the rest of the video and then we'll have a discussion at the end about it. I think the best thing to do is
of its predecessor. Long-distance trade became more difficult for the merchants of these regions during this time, and that would no doubt have contributed to the decline of the Indus Valley civilization, which relied on such trade. The people did not move south to run from anything. They moved south toward better living conditions and opportunity. The cities were abandoned not because of invasion, but due to overuse of resources and, most likely, overpopulation. Racial reinterpretation. When the ruins of the city of Harappa were discovered by the explorer Charles Masson, pseudonym of the British soldier and scholar James Lewis, lived 1800 to 1853 CE, in 1829 CE, no one knew this civilization had ever existed, and later, applying the racial theories which had developed, Western scholars concluded that there had been a massive Aryan invasion which destroyed the cities and drove the survivors south. Nothing was known of the Indus Valley civilization when Sir William Jones published his Proto-Indo-European theory of language in 1780.
Crazy how they don't know. They didn't even know that them people even existed. So the first thing they've done is just attach that's like a proper invade, warmongers, ain't it? It's like, no, they must have been driven out. Because that's exactly their mindset, and we'll find somewhere new. We'll drive these people out and take everything they got.
1786 CE, and had it been known, it would have no doubt been attributed to the work of some other supposedly light-skinned race, in the same way later Western archaeologists and scholars would claim the Egyptians were Caucasian and that the Maya of Mesoamerica were somehow a colony of Egypt. The kind of systemic racism which led to these conclusions cannot be traced to a single individual, but the association of Aryan with white supremacy can. Joseph Arthur de Gobineau was a would-be scholar and fiction writer from an aristocratic French family who, though poor himself and constantly struggling to make a living, still considered himself superior to others. He published his work, An Essay on the Inequality of the Human Races, in 1855 CE, in which, among other racist claims, he insisted that the term Aryan applied to light-skinned Europeans who had Aryan blood and were superior to others of darker complexion who did not. Gobineau became an ardent admirer of the German composer Richard Wagner, lived 1813 to 1883 CE, who, he discovered, had read his book and admired him as well. Gobineau became a member of Wagner's Bayreuth circle, and so did another Wagner enthusiast and ardent racist, Houston Stewart Chamberlain, who would eventually become Wagner's son-in-law. Chamberlain further associated Aryan with ethnicity in his work, claiming that Caucasians had established all the great civilizations in the world. This view is generally cited as contributing to the formulation of the Aryan invasion theory, and perhaps it did, but if so, it does not seem to have been intentional on the part of Max Muller. Although Muller is routinely cited as the author of the Aryan invasion theory, he actually only gave a name to what men like Gobineau and Chamberlain already believed. Muller himself never advocated for the claim that Aryan had anything to do with ethnicity, but based his theory of an invasion of India by a northern people on his interpretation of the Rig Veda, oldest of the Vedas, parts of which suggested this possibility to him. It is unfortunate, actually, that Muller's name must be routinely associated with those of racists and anti-Semites, as he himself was neither, and believed in racial equality. The works of Gobineau and Chamberlain would inspire and encourage Hitler and his ideological architect Alfred Rosenberg to establish the Nazi Party in Germany and set the country on its course toward World War II and the Holocaust. After Germany's defeat in 1945 CE, their works were discredited, and rejected by most mainstream scholars, but in often watered-down and diffused academic language still appeared, and continue to appear, in scholarly works on the history and cultural development of the Indian subcontinent. These theories were further popularized through the work of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, a highly respected archaeologist and scholar who excavated the sites of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro between 1944 to 1948 CE, interpreted his finds in light of racialist theories, and certified the Aryan invasion theory as well-established history. Conclusion. In the 1960s CE, however, Wheeler's claims, which rested largely on skeletons found during his excavations, which he claimed presented evidence of violent death in battle, were refuted, thanks largely to the work of the American scholar and archaeologist George F. Dales. Dales found no evidence at any of the ancient sites to support the claims of invasion and conquest, and neither has anyone else since. In the present day, the Aryan invasion theory has been discredited, and is only advanced by those pushing a racialist or nationalist agenda. The old theory, still taught in high school and university classes, in the United States at least, until fairly recently, which maintained a vision of light-skinned Aryans conquering dark-skinned Dravidians, has been replaced by the far more informed and realistic understanding of a migration pattern and blending of cultures. John Key comments, "Perhaps some of the Aryan clans were invited into India as allies, mercenaries, or traitors. The indigenous people may not have been Dravidians, but earlier Indo-Aryan arrivals. There is nothing to suggest that the Aryans ever constructed castles and cities, as some have claimed, and the archaeological evidence, being almost entirely ceramic, gives no hint of the sudden change one would expect from the conquest and suppression of an entire nationality. Arguably, the process of Aryanization, by which Arya culture spread to non-Arya peoples, continued throughout the subcontinent's history, indeed is still going on to this day." Key also notes that the people of the Indus Valley civilization gave as much as they received, culturally, from the Aryan migrants, and the relationship was mutually beneficial. The unfortunate association of the term Aryan with the misguided and ignorant concept of white supremacy continues in the present day, but it is hoped that, in time, that will change, just as racialist definitions and interpretations of the past have, and Aryan will again assume its original meaning in defining one who is noble, who recognizes that which is worth hearing and remembering for one's own and the greater good, and is therefore civilized. At the same time, the definition of Aryan might be expanded and enlarged in a universal sense to include anyone of any skin color, class, or cultural affiliation who respects and acknowledges the inherent human dignity and rights of any other.
Aryans were actually Iranians.
Who were?
Who were what?
Well, the areas they're talking about is basically where, Mesopotamia, biblical history,
Yeah.
The Sumerians and Anunnaki areas. So, really, who are the Aryans? Are they from Sumeria area or from it could have been more specific in terms of saying who they actually were than rather than saying...
You said they were Iranians? That's quite specific, isn't it?
Indo-Iranian group, which again, Aryan and Iran are the same thing, so saying they're Aryans, this is the Indo-Aryan group, migrated into India, you understand?
Yeah.
Whereas they, as a people, came from somewhere. So if they were descendants from, like I said, the Anunnaki, Sumerian period, where did those people go?
Okay. But we could be, yeah, I get what you're saying, but then he could be doing that for the star of man.
No, specifically the Aryan, because we started with Aryans. The Aryans moved to here, but we didn't know where the Aryans came from. That's my, it's not the start of man, it's specific to the Aryans.
Well, he was saying that Aryans started in, this is the thing, isn't it? Aryan, he was alluding to that Aryan
is Iranian.
Yeah, but it's not as essentially like a, what's the word I'm looking for? An ethnicity.
Yeah.
So
it was
Aryan was just a term for Iranians. So Iranians just lived in Irania, but if you were noble and civilized, so it was more of a class thing, then you were deemed Aryan. That's all he's trying to say. And the same for so you had the Indo-Iranians and the Indo-Aryans. So I'm guessing they all lived on the Indus Valley somewhere or around there. So what I'm saying is he wouldn't need to go into like the history of the Iranians, because Aryans essentially you didn't even have to be an Iranian to be an Aryan, is what I'm trying to say. You just had to be
the region became known after
the
type of people who occupied it and the allergy. But again, people in England come from somewhere. People in Germany, there was always Germanic tribes, but they can trace them back where they came from. So similar with the upper class people who lived in Iran at that time before it was called Iran.
Where did they come from?
What was it called before it was called Iran? You understand? So it's informative.
It was definitely informative.
But it stayed in the present, not the historic.
Well, I think it stayed in the essence of how it related to India, because that was the important part, and like a lot of how Europeans, Germans, French. Well, the French guy obviously started the whole Aryan thing. Can't remember his name now.
How it became racial. Yeah,
and they racialized it, and then how that spread through Europe. It's weird how things just adapt on it quickly. Like, people have never been to India, but they're going to take someone's language and then tell people what that language means. And just...
Wasn't that...
That's like branding, isn't it?
Well, marketing, after the Dark Ages, Europeans entered into this Enlightenment era, and that's what made them proud and boastful and believed that they knew everything, even though they was plundering the information from everywhere they went. That process of assimilation.
And misinterpreting it.
Yeah, which the Arabs did, which every conquering tribe did.
Yes.
Romans did from the Greeks, etc., etc. Back to the Anunnaki and the Sumerians.
No, again, like I said, it was informative, and I liked it.
And it didn't touch on, again, like the connection between, like I would say, they keep saying the underclass, but really, the dark African Indian problem. So I want to know more about. It's nice to know where it comes from. That doesn't really tell me enough detail.
Well, there was a word that they said, so we can look it up. It was you had the Aryan, Indo-Aryans, and was it the Dravidians?
Dravidians, yeah.
Dravidians. So really we need to look into the origins of Dravidians to see that association.
Well, they're the Indus Valley people, the original Indus Valley people, the Dravidians. And then they invaded in theory, by Aryans. In theory, because that's what it says, it is a theory. But,
well, what would you say? Because obviously from the video they've just disproved that theory. I know it's
one theory, and I'm going to take it as a theory rather than him having disproved or anything. It'll go into the facts. We'll learn more as we go along. But Aryan Dravidian, so we know that the split generally, and then how that further splits is what we'll learn as we go along, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that was Aryan Origins. We out. Peace.